Welcome to episode 15 of the Necronama.com. This week's episode is brought to you by a combination of not sleeping, trying to cut sugar, and overall insanity. I hope you enjoy. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now, and I'm just here today, which is apparently a plus in my world.
And I'm Don Guillory, author, historian, co-host of this podcast, and wishing all my fellow veterans a happy Veterans Day, and let's go get our free food today.
So let me start with, I'm trying to cut sugar, and it sucks ass. So for any of you out there trying to cut sugar and other people don't understand the withdrawal you're going through and how fucking much it's like cutting heroin, or so I hear, you have my sympathy. Or you would if I gave a shit about other humans right now. But I don't, because I'm cutting sugar. So with all of that said, this weekend, I was at TUSCON in Tucson, Arizona. We had some wonderful panels. We actually did a really great panel that I'm highly interested in doing elsewhere. It was called Mental Illness, How We Write It, How We Live It. And I just want to send a shout out to everybody who was on that panel with me, because we all got really personal, really fast. Everybody just let their walls down and literally talked about the shit that we face in our lives, how it really destroys us some days, how we keep fighting. But also everyone was just willing to be vulnerable with the audience. The audience was super respectful. We were just listening to the audience and the things they've been through. Some people talked abuse, some people talked drug addiction or whatever else. And it was just such a cool panel. And the main takeaway that everyone got was, hey, every single fucking person in this room has been affected in some way. And for some reason, society likes to just ignore it all and basically sit there and say, it's happening to someone else, not me, so I don't need to do anything about it. And that's bullshit, man. Everybody has something, and I think the sooner that as society we start embracing that, the better we'll all be. We talked about the responsibility of writers and filmmakers and everyone else to, number one, get it right, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your experiences are the same as everyone else's, but just being respectful of it and doing your best to not just use it as a terrible thing in your writing or an excuse for behavior. Joker, I'm looking at you. And yeah, overall, it was an awesome panel. My big takeaways from the event, I got to meet Scott Bradley, S.A. Bradley from Hellbent for Horror. If you haven't heard his podcast, check it out after you listen to ours, or at least after you download our stuff. And I met Jessica Feinberg, who was absolutely amazing and extremely just cheery, which I really needed when, as I said, I'm kind of hating the world 24 hours a day right now. And Diana Terrell Clark was also really, really cool. So shout out to all of you as well. So Don, what have you been doing? It's okay to be totally normal, not be on my superhero status level. No, really. What's seen any good movies or anything?
It's such a quiet weekend. All the Bama fans and all the Cowboys fans are pretty quiet. That's just my sports commentary.
My 4-year-old daughter, who loves the color purple, thinks it's great that the Vikings won.
And she is a Vikings fan too, I guess by default.
It's only because she didn't see the Ravens first.
But yeah. But no, I've got I'm I guess a finalist for TED Talk now, so I just have to do, I guess, my final submission, my final spiel, and crossing my fingers, I'll get in. but not too much on my end other than working, watching some movies or catching up on movies, doing some writing when I have the chance, and talking myself off of a ledge for working full time, going back to graduate school full time, doing all this stuff, and then trying to maintain some sense of normalcy.
You should definitely cut sugar while you're at it. That'll help.
Well, I was fasting over the weekend, so I feel your pain.
Good God, that's even worse.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So I suppose people want to hear about Edward Scissorhands, or that might be why they downloaded this. I don't know. So
no, wait, no. They want to hear about hot dog fingers.
We can't go directly into Edward Penis Hands, can we?
No. I'm talking about The Office.
I wouldn't know. I don't watch that show.
One of the diseases from season 1, episode 3. Hot dog fingers.
I want to talk Edward Penis Hands. Let's start there.
No adult film parodies on this podcast, sir.
I really just want to talk about the reaction Tim Burton had when he found out, because that's the greatest part. So the greatest part was Burton just was like really disappointed that Edward Penis Hands only had 1 penis on each hand instead of 5, and I think that's really funny.
I've never heard of at least an artist or a director respond to the way that their films get parodied within the world of adult entertainment.
Isn't that interesting? Most people wouldn't take that time, but he did. So now that I said something nice about him, let's just go into Tim Burton's a racist. All right, we'll come back to that.
I'm the expert on racism, but
oh, we'll let you talk about it. Don't worry. But where shall we start?
You know what? Let's start. For those of you who haven't watched the movie, you've missed out because the movie is 29 years old. It'll be 30 years next year because it came out in 1990. Starred Johnny Depp and Winona Ryder, which most of you younger listeners would know Johnny Depp as being Jack Sparrow and Grindelwald from the new Harry Potter movies. I'm sorry, the new Wizarding World movies.
Let's not forget Tonto.
I think everybody in their right mind. And then, of course, more recently, Winona Ryder from Stranger Things.
Awesome. So, a lot of the criticism I get from this show sometimes is, that's not really horror, man. And I just want to start with the opening shots in this film, because they are horror. Like, it is pure gothic horror.
Yeah.
You have the almighty castle looming over everything. He does these far away shots when she gets out of the car instead of up close, right? So that the castle's always imposing. It's literally on a hill overlooking everything, You get inside and you get that comedy aspect. You get the lighthearted, nice, there's all these great bushes cut into animal shapes and stuff.
They're called topiaries, James.
Ooh, learning new words. How exciting. And then she goes inside and it's all dark and he's hiding in the shadows and he comes out almost Freddy Krueger-ish, with the claws out. And
her reaction is like, "Oh, I'll leave. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you. I'll leave the house." And her whole job is, I hate to say this about salespeople or door deals, but your whole job is to interrupt people.
Absolutely.
Or interrupt their day.
Yeah. And even her friends are like, I never fucking buy anything. What are you doing? I love that. But yeah, so then Edward comes out and you still have that horror shot, And we go into the comedy of his little, I don't know, his little squeaky voice or whatever you want to call it, and Burton instantly, I think there's a lot to be said for how Burton makes him safe by making him very feminine. He's got that quiet voice instead of a booming, masculine, scary voice, and he's very timid and very nice, but then he's dressed like a fucking Pinhead. There's I think there's a lot to be said there, and I don't know if that was purposeful or. I mean, I assume at least the voice was purposeful, but outside of that, I can't really say. But I think there's a lot to be said for his view that makes it safer, you know?
Well, he's non-threatening. I mean, you have this threatening image, but he's non-threatening. As far as with the scissors on his hands or scissors 4 fingers. But yeah, the overall look of him is supposed to be so threatening, but then you're put off by the voice as far as like, no, don't be scared. And, that's as close as to Michael Jackson's voice I'm going to get. But, just the idea that he's the one who's hiding from, I forget her name, from the saleswoman, the mom. He's the one who's hiding. And then he's scared that she's going to leave. And this is the first contact that he's had with the outside world since the scientist died. Or the inventor died. And, he's been looking for something and it shows up. And maybe it's an issue of, he's scared to see what the outside world offers. And once he gets exposed to the outside world, he quickly understands, like, I definitely shouldn't be here.
Yeah. I'm still thinking about his image, and even his hair is like Robert Smith from The Cure.
Yeah.
So that's not exactly intimidating either. But yeah, so he wants somebody around him, but he's also terrified. I mean, I think we can all kind of identify with that, right? And
Introverts unite someday. Sometime, then, maybe. I don't know. We don't like to go outside.
He goes and joins their little society, and he tries to like show how he can do nice things for people until, they totally fuck him over and he runs away. I mean, I can identify with all of that. So.
All right. You brought up the whole thing about the castle. Yeah. And the imposing structure that it had, the imposing figure that it set. But for me, and this is looking, especially when you look at movies when you're a kid and when you see them again as an adult. I think I was like 11 when this movie came out. So I was looking for, okay, this is a badass dude. He's got some scissors on his hands. Okay, it's a cute little love story comedy. There were so many things I didn't laugh at the movie when I first saw it. But there was stuff that as an adult, and then again, this past week rewatching it, I looked at it and was like, that was kind of funny. That was kind of clever. But there were things in the movie that juxtaposed with the castle itself that when I was 11, I didn't see as being horrifying. But as an adult, it's horrifying. I mean, it's scary because, if you live in any of these communities that have, HOAs or even if you don't have an HOA, but they're, you used to have these Levitt towns, or I guess they still exist, that would have covenant contracts that stipulated, and this is way before HOAs, would stipulate how your house had to look, the amount of people that could be there, the times in which cars could be outside. I think even Disneyland Disney World had started up a community kind of like this, or kind of like the one that's in Edward Scissorhands. And it was all about conformity. You're not supposed to have your house look too different from anybody else's. The colors have to be approved by the board or by the HOA. And so I'm watching this. All I'm thinking of is all the peer pressure that is put on the people in these neighborhoods. And then the peer pressure that they put on themselves to adhere or conform to whatever is supposed to be expected out of them. Because this whole idea of like, I don't want to be the shitty neighbor. Because if I'm looking across and I see somebody they're out there mowing their lawn. Oh shit, I better go out and mow my lawn too, because I don't want my yard to look bad. Oh, if my house is starting to peel some paint or it's not looking right, I need to do something about it. Or even, the whole movie itself, even though I guess it's supposed to be the 1980s because of the technology that they're talking about when Jim's parents buy a new VCR with 4 heads on it. It's all 1950s as far as the way that you're expected to behave. None of the women work. All the husbands work. So all the women are housewives. They're staying at home. And you have Joyce at the beginning of the film, way before we even meet Edward, how she tells her friend when she comes to sell the Avon or the beauty products, like, yeah, you see a car is in my driveway, right? so you can tell I'm entertaining. And it's kind of that code that you would have of, don't you realize I'm fucking the handyman, or I'm trying to fuck the handyman, and you're interrupting my game here? And that's the thing that's kind of accepted. But when Edward comes down, it's, oh my God, look at this weird guy. Oh my gosh. And all the wives are calling each other, which, it gets into this other thing of, well, in my own reality, what are the neighbors possibly saying about me? Because, if all these people are sitting there gossiping about, one person, they're all talking shit about each other at one point. Because I'm sure somebody's sitting there talking about Joyce, saying, man, Joyce has got another man over there. Oh, I'm going to wait and I'm going to watch and see if her husband comes home from work early and catches her.
I like how they don't even instantly go, hey, there's this weird motherfucker with Peg. It's just Peg's got a man with her.
Yeah.
I thought that was such an interesting thing that I noticed on this viewing that I hadn't on the others. Like, they don't instantly think he's weird. And I'm not just talking scissors for hands, because maybe they can't see that part. But, his hair definitely doesn't fit into this neighborhood. His leather outfit he's got going on doesn't fit in. But they're just obsessed with, oh shit, Peg's got a man over there.
But then they all rush over. Because they want to find out. Because they know that nothing's going on, right?
Yeah, they know Peg's not hooking up. They're like, yeah, we can interrupt this. Like, nobody's running over to stop that handyman you were talking about, Because they know they might accidentally see Joyce naked.
You mean dollar store Peggy Bundy?
See, I was thinking about that. Like, in my head, she's always played by Peg Bundy, even though she's not. She's actually Joanna on The Ranch, if you watch that, which I know you don't, but I was talking to our listeners. But no, I think it's funny that she's always Peg Bundy in my head. And I'm like, you were telling me that the show apparently didn't come out that far before Edward Scissorhands, whereas in my head, it's like a 10-year span,
Yeah, I think it was only maybe 1 or 2 years before the movie came out, which means, the movie was probably filming while Married with Children was on, but I can't see her being too. I see the two characters being based off the same type of personality.
Oh, yeah. Kind of makes you wonder if there was somebody in Hollywood that was inspiring all this. But yeah, so back to, everybody running over and everybody gossiping and all that. My mom would be so happy living in this neighborhood. But all I could think about when you were talking about the HOA and the color palettes of the houses, I'm like, who the fuck chose the color palette in this neighborhood? Because they are hideous. There's the ugly greenhouse and these bright fucking fluorescent houses, but there's only 4 colors. So it's still
that's
very
your HOA for you.
Yeah.
There's only a handful of colors because you have to fit, the highlighter or lime green color and all that other stuff that's out there. But absolutely. I mean, you've definitely got that visual aspect of the juxtaposition between these bright colors in this very dark and drab place that Edward is coming from. And kind of and I don't know if this was intentional, but I saw this kind of as that revealing scene with Wizard of Oz, where you go from that sepia where everything's depressing and horrible to she goes to this land of color that's all mysterious and fun. And then, she murders a witch and then goes on a killing spree. But that whole idea that we should go ahead and have this more colorful place is going to be more welcoming. And it's not initially. And that's kind of the scary thing about it is he's not truly welcome until he has some usefulness. And if that's not the American story with respect to race and immigration, I don't know what is.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the Chinese themselves, see, listeners thought I was going to go with black. The Chinese themselves.
Listeners?
I know. No, our listeners would never say that.
Our hosts would. All
yes,
right,
you would.
Continue.
But the Chinese and the Irish themselves were welcome with respect to coming to work, but really easy to target after they weren't, or when they weren't useful for different types of discrimination and even immigration restrictions. The Chinese weren't welcome in this country again until World War II, because they weren't the model minority at that point. But because they were fighting the Japanese, or the Japanese had tried to colonize them, and they were waging war against the Japanese before the United States got involved, they immediately became top tier with respect to Asian immigrants. Huh. Because, they had their usefulness. They're our allies. These guys get us. They understand us. But, the other guys that we like, the Japanese, they're not with us right now. We might not have liked them previously as far as the Chinese, but things have changed. You're useful. You have some purpose. We want to make sure that you're on our side. And that's what I see with Edward. It's kind of like those scissor hands that make him, as an external viewer and viewing the situation, make him a freak, make him a weirdo, but make him accepted because he can start making topiaries. And then he starts doing the dogs, and then he starts doing hairstyles for these lonely housewives, and Joyce has an orgasm while she's cutting his hair. Which, as a kid, I still got that scene. I was like, something's a little strange about this situation. And there are all these books about, the lonely housewives and alcohol, which was one thing that didn't come up. You came up with Peg's husband, where, he's going down to the basement to show Edward where he can stay on the fold-out couch, and then he's sneaking alcohol, and then gives it to Edward. He's like, hey, it's just lemonade, because he even understands, like, because this kid is so innocent, he's probably going to tell if I tell him that it's bourbon or scotch or whatever, and he's going to tell Peg, and I'm going to get in trouble. So fuck it. Let me just tell him it's lemonade. He doesn't know the difference. But, that whole idea of what you can and can't do comes up with, what the expected family roles are supposed to be. So, hey, Dad, you're not supposed to be drinking. But you had a lot of stuff with respect to housewives and alcoholism, or even drug use for that matter. In the 50s and 60s, there's some good readings with respect to that topic. And I just see Joyce as being emblematic of that, of how she wants to do all this stuff. She wants to be sexually liberated. She wants to have fun, but she's trapped for that matter. She's trapped in this life of expectations and what should be taking place.
Absolutely. I'm surprised we don't get a lot of alcohol references with Jim. Like, because you would think that his little van of fun would be like have a full service bar in there.
Well, I mean, they were drinking in the end of it, and I'm sure they were drinking when they were on their trip or whatever they were going on.
Oh, yeah, no, I just mean, I'm surprised that it's not more prevalent, like it's not the entire time. So.
Right. Or they were smoking some of that sticky icky.
Also, can I say how weird it is that I found out on this viewing that was Anthony Michael Hall? It's really strange to me. Anyway. But, so the number one theme in this movie to me is isolation. And I think you're really talking about that already. But I like how it's with everybody, even the people who think they're in a community or a little society, they still feel totally isolated, like you're saying. Even to the point that, they're looking for other people because their husband's at work or whatever. Like that's real isolation right there. And with Edward, I think that he might not feel it as much. Like he kind of wants Peg, but I don't know that he wanted a full on town at first, I think he wanted that one connection that he had before. And I think that in itself is interesting, that isolation gets worse the more that you're surrounded by people, because that's how it is in my life. If I choose to be alone, then it's a great thing. But like, there's nothing worse than being in a place with a ton of people and feeling completely alone. And I think that Tim Burton does that feeling really well in a lot of his movies.
Oh, definitely. And even as you were saying that, I was thinking about all the places that you can be surrounded by people and feel completely alone. College campus for me, it was college campuses. Still is college campuses, where you have all these people that are all, for the most part, you all have the same goal, just the same as with the people in this film as far as what they expect out of life. But there's that idea that you have to conform somehow. Now, I'm speaking of a college experience in the 90s, that you have to conform somehow, because if you stand out, there's something wrong with you, and you don't want to be seen as the one that has something wrong with you. And I think what's really great is that college campuses themselves in the 2010s have become a lot more welcoming and a lot more open to the diversity. I shouldn't even say more open. They're becoming more inclusive. So,
Okay.
those people that have been left behind or not included before are now included. Unless you're, somebody from Talking Points USA, Young Americans for Freedom or something, you think that you're being oppressed. That's my shot at those guys. But yeah, we at the University of Mississippi last week, a couple of weeks ago, they opened up an LGBTQ center, a resource center for students in the LGBTQ plus community that they can go, get counseling, get specialized treatment as far as anything that they want to, counseling for anything that they want to talk about, academic, personal, whatever. And fortunately, it wasn't poorly received. It was well received when it was here. Now, I can't speak for people in the outer community, because at least in parts of the South, and especially in small towns, and in the way that suburbia and small towns mirror themselves, there is this idea that you should conform. It doesn't matter if what you have is a better idea in a lot of cases, until the consensus is that that's a good idea or that's the way we're heading. You can't stand out by yourself and have that individuality. And that's kind of the sad thing with suburbs. And in a lot of cases, if you don't fit in, you have that isolation itself, or you self-isolate. As far as, I'm not, hey, they're having a barbecue down the road, they're having a cookout, I don't need to go to that, because I don't want to be surrounded with that. The problem with Edward is he does, like you said, he wants that connection with people, and he feels some sense of purpose. But the sad thing is, I think once he starts to feel some sense of purpose that he's guiding himself, that's when other people start telling him what his purpose should be. With making him appear on television and then trying to get the salon and all this other stuff. Like, Edward doesn't seem to be into any of that. It's just kind of like, this is what we can do with you. This is what we can do to make you, quote unquote, normal.
I was also just thinking about how he's forced to conform, but not. Like, they give him clothes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't just put on the clothes. Like, I mean, number one, he has scissors for hands, so he cuts up the clothes a little bit. So they're definitely not fitting in, But he fucking wears them over his little leather thing he's got going on. And I don't know if that's supposed to be part of his body, but it looks like clothes. So I like that it's just over that. Like, he can't hide who he is, even when he's trying to conform and trying to fit in. It's still blatantly obvious that you're different than us. And if that is his skin, then he has black skin and Burton's a racist. But we'll come back to that. So I'm just building to that. That's like my big thing now. At some point, we'll reveal that Burton's a racist. I'm just tipping people off. But no, I love how, number one, they use the black clothing at the beginning to make him imposing, but then when he's innocent in society, he's wearing white. And then at the end, when he, from their point of view, goes ballistic and harms people, he shreds off the white clothes and goes back to all black. So you get that symbolism again, But I love that he just wears the clothes over what he already has. I think that's such a blatant look. I still don't fit in.
You know, the only person I saw that was nice to him and really had didn't have a negative interaction with him was the war vet. And I can't remember if they gave him a name or not. But, you know, they're at the park. He's the only one who addresses him in this way, where he walks up to him and is like, don't ever let anybody tell you that you're a cripple. And for that, you know, of course, Edward's character doesn't understand what he means, but, you know, anybody in the audience should get that. It's this idea that they're going to fucking treat you differently. Don't let them. And even at the end, when everybody's, you know, looking for Edward and trying to hunt him down, he's just kind of out there. It's like, hey, did you guys find him yet? You know, just sitting in his garage. Because it's like, I'm not going to go fucking hunt this guy down. One, I have a metal hip. And then two, I fucking hope that he, you know, he goes and has a normal life away from you bastards, because I can't get out of here. So, I mean, that guy really I identified with, because it was that whole thing of, I know how they're looking at you. I'm not going to look that way at you because I know what it feels like. Which gets to, you know, even, you know, with whatever war it could be, because I don't think he identified which one it was, whether it's World War II or especially if it happened to be, you know, with respect to Vietnam, that idea that there was kind of a different outlook at Vietnam veterans as opposed to Korean and World War II veterans, with them coming back and trying to fit in back in a society, whereas World War II veterans were heavily welcomed back. You had housing programs, you had the GI Bill, you had, you know, a lot of different things that were going to cater to them, to make, you know, even training and educational programs. You had these programs that were going to make it easier for them to integrate back into society, whereas Vietnam veterans were isolated in a lot of cases. So he definitely spoke to me, because I thought about, at least historically, the way that they were ostracized or treated as an other, when they were just trying to, well, hell, for the most part, just live their lives, or in the case of the war, just survive. But yeah, you know, that brings us, I guess we can talk about that whole aspect of discrimination, because when we were talking earlier, you talked about how Edward possibly represents this idea of immigrants themselves. But we could also see it with respect to the way that any marginalized communities themselves get treated or are seen in a, you know, non-marginalized community or dominant community or majority community, addressing that to where. Well, go ahead.
I was just going to throw out that if you really want to get into the immigration thing, he doesn't even come here willingly. A white person goes to his home, gets him and brings him back, and then puts him to work, and then like decides, you know, you kind of suck. Like, not her particularly, but the community as a whole, the new nation he's in, if you will, where he was brought against, you know, just saying, it's very slavery-esque. Like, a white person broke into his place, brought him back, and then, yeah, you know, just shits on him after that. Like, they don't even help him eat, for Christ's sake.
That was what I thought was odd. You know, you got that comical piece where, oh, it's him struggling, but even the husband is the only one who helps him, you know, with anything, is with food, regarding food, because when he's going to drink that the bourbon or the gin or whatever it was, he gives him a straw. He's like, I know you can't hold it, so here's a straw. Yeah. You know, that's basically his reaction. But yeah, when he's eating, there's no helping it. They gave him food, but.
And they all just watch him. It's so fucking weird. And he's like trying to lift this single pea up to his mouth. And I know it's a comedy moment, but like, as somebody that's worked with people with disabilities most of my life, like, it's such a shit moment, because that would not be my reaction. My reaction would be, dude, do you need help? Like, you know, like, I'd be feeding him or whatever. So it blows my mind that this whole family just sits there and watches him try to lift a pea with 2 pairs of scissors.
Well, and then the son is only interested in taking him to show and tell.
Right? Well, it's all, how can I use you?
Yeah.
And for as racist as Tim Burton is, let me try.
Wait, before you even get there,
hang on. No, this is a real point. This is a real point. Like, for as racist as Tim Burton is, he really like goes out of his way to show how white people just fucking sit there and don't help anybody. All right, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you're talking about using him. That's what Jim and Winona Ryder's character do. They need to break into the house. So, oh shit, he has these things on his hand that can actually get us in the house.
And you can take the rap.
Yeah. Which
I love how everyone in the community just instantly accepts that he did it. Like, right. Oh, the outsider did it, you know?
Because that's what makes most sense. Because it's not going to be somebody from their own community. Why would somebody in their own community do something to one of their neighbors?
I don't know if you know this, but Jim's parents are really rich.
I gotta say this: watching the movie the first time, watching the movie a second time, and then rewatching again as as a 41-year-old adult who's lived in the suburbs. I'm gonna tell you right now: either Jim's dad is cheap as hell, or Jim's dad is not loaded, because there's no way in hell you're looking at all these these homes, these ranch style and not craftsman, these ranch style homes, but anyway, basically these prefab planned communities. He's gonna buy one of those. Like but then again, it always almost questions: is this Jim just not just bullshitting, but is it Jim as a teenager not knowing what the fuck loaded means?
Well, I think that's part of it because, like they have the alarm system and they have the door that can lock itself and all that shit. So I feel like they're the upper echelon of where they are.
Right.
And so to Jim, that's loaded. You know what I mean? Like, and he's a stupid teenager who probably doesn't have a job or anything else. So to him, it's like, he's got all this money and he won't give it to me when dad's probably making a little more than everyone else because he's the supervisor or whatever.
Yeah, because this looks clearly like a blue collar union neighborhood. I mean, because it looks as though all the husbands there have blue collar jobs with job security to where they can go ahead and have in economic security for that matter. To where they can have their wives stay home, their kids get to, go to school and participate in whatever extracurricular activities are out there. There are no real worries. It for me, yeah, that whole thing about being loaded in there just stood out to me, where it's kind of like, one, I wanted to punch Jim in the face, and then two, I'm sitting there like, that can't be possible, because your kids, no matter how much or how little money you have, your kids always think you have money.
Tell me about it.
I mean, if you happen to have anything, you have more money than they do. So they think that you have some.
I was the same way. I thought my dad was super rich, I was like, give me the quarters, old man. I got to go to the arcade.
Exactly.
Now I'm like, get your own fucking quarters. What's wrong with you? It's like $1 to play pinball. Screw you. But so the other thing about Jim's whole what were they even stealing? I just watched it and I don't remember. So either they don't say or it's really fucking forgettable. So do you know what it was?
I think it's pretty forgettable, because all I got of it was, my dad's got insurance. It'll cover what we steal, and that's what I remember, is him talking about the insurance policy and the fact that, that they're going to go in there and it's going to be fine. Edward can get us in. We'll get the stuff. We'll get out. It'll all be cool.
I like how he's selling it as like a victimless crime.
Yeah.
He's like, no, nobody will get hurt. And then he's like, fuck you, Edward, and just ditches his ass, Well,
Jeez. The security system brings up another thing. Again, it was probably a comedic point, but you start to see I can't remember if it's in the 70s or 80s, but anyway, it's a 1990 movie, but it's really the 80s. But you start to see this influx during the Reagan years in home security. As far as like how secure your house can be, and this is the type of alarm that you want, and this is an alarm for your car if somebody steals it. And I guess you can compare this movie to The Purge.
I was thinking that. I was like, this is how The Purge starts, man.
Yeah, because as soon as that alarm goes off, there's like a steel door that drops down. Like there were so many things. Again, comedically, it works, but as far as watching it and seeing how things would work, it makes no sense that all this would happen. And by the way, the cops show up way too fucking soon.
Like, right? They were like ready to go.
It was like 3 cop cars, and they were there in like 10 seconds.
Maybe his dad's the mayor or something. So they were like, shit, we got to actually get there,
Even then, 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Should have been there that fast. But, but that again gets into this idea of security and safety within the suburbs. You're going there to escape the urban area that's riddled with crime, riddled with drugs, or whatever other types of stuff that you think is going on. Because there's about the same amount of drugs in the suburbs, let's be honest. But you're leaving there to go buy a home in the suburbs, and you see it as an investment because you basically get conned into seeing this as an investment because the way system gets set up in the post World War II era. But it's expressed to you that this is an investment. You go out there, you want to protect it, you want to have a safe neighborhood. So you want to have that conformity within those neighborhoods to ensure that your investment appreciates. Then beyond that, you want to make sure that the right people are in those neighborhoods so that you don't lose money on your investment, which leads us to what hopefully you'll get to with your complaint about Tim Burton. Is the fact
the racist? Yeah, I've heard of him.
Neighborhood, and this may not be his design. It may just be reflecting what was taking place. So you've got a little bit of historical accuracy with this. There are no black people living in this neighborhood. The only black person I ever see in this neighborhood is the black police officer. And
Absolutely.
I can't remember if he happens to be the police chief or just captain or just a random police officer that happens to know the neighborhood or that happens to be his beat.
So, I mean, we'll get to that in a second. And I mean, I'm overplaying the racist thing because I do think it's a good talking point. But my thing that I find really interesting that I hadn't thought about before you were talking, when you were talking about the veteran earlier and how he's an outsider, right? Well, and then the police officer is black, so he's sort of an outsider as well. It's interesting how the true authority figures, if you will, like we always view military and police as authority, right? So these two authority figures are outsiders and different because this community has its own authority. And it's not based on that stuff. It's based on everyone watching each other and having this panopticon of their little residencies, right? And self-policing, basically. And like at the end, like the police officer is the one who basically saves Edward's life. Well, he does save Edward's life, by telling everybody, oh, he's dead, go away. And so I think it's interesting how he knows that he's that outsider role. And so he's protecting another outsider. That I hadn't really considered it that way until now, and I really like that. So let's talk Tim Burton's a racist, since I keep saying it. And again, I mean, I'm overplaying it, but it is a concern because it's weird. And I wanna talk about the difference between my book Fat Camp, which also only has one black character and one Asian character, and what I see with Tim Burton and why I think that there's a difference. And feel free to correct me if you think this is total bullshit, okay? But here's my theory. So Fat Camp is set in a real place, right? It's in a little town in Iowa, and anyone that's been in a little town in Iowa knows that there's legitimately one black person, maybe one Asian guy. There's not, I mean, maybe there's a family, like a mom and dad and their kids, right? But there's not like several generations. There's not like, a large community of people of color there. So like when I wrote Fat Camp, I did it because that's who's really there. But I also picked a real place. And so to me, that's more authentic. Whereas Tim Burton's creating a society. Okay. There's no society where their houses all fucking look like this. And there's no castle on a hill looming over everything. So you created all this so you can make things as diverse as needed, right? Or as you want to. And so that's the difference to me. Do you think that that's legit, or is that my white self protecting myself?
Yeah, but you're going to make me defend Tim Burton.
Yeah, let's do it. That sounds great.
I'm doing this for Helena Bonham Carter, okay? So I'm going to have to trash Tim Burton after this.
I just found out, and I know this is probably like total knowledge to everyone else out there, but Kenneth Branagh cheated on Emma Thompson with Helena Bonham Carter. And I was like, holy shit, Gilderoy Lockhart cheated on Professor Trelawney with fucking Bellatrix Lestrange. I mean, that's amazing. Anyway, all right, go ahead.
Did he, or did he just obliviate everybody and say?
Well, I mean, maybe that's why I don't remember it.
All right. Here's where I'm going to give Tim Burton some credit. Whereas other movies where he could have had more diversity in stuff that he created. This one, I think, since he's trying to do the whole 1950s, 1960s suburbs, I think it works.
Absolutely.
I think it works to keep it as white as possible. Because if you go back and you look at any of the Time Life magazine photographs from that time period, talking about Levittowns especially, they were damn near all white. And I mean all white with respect to what we perceive as white, not necessarily what they perceived as white. Because in a lot of cases, Jewish people weren't welcome in these areas. And at a certain point in the post-war period, you have what's known as the path to whiteness just the path to whiteness, in which immigrant groups, religious groups that hadn't been considered white before, like Italians, Irish, Jewish, even Eastern Europeans, they weren't considered white until, or at least they weren't considered fully white until the post-war period, until we're talking about the 1950s and 60s. In some cases, not even then. And what you saw, at least in this film, that gets represented well, is this idea that there's only one religion that's represented and is ridiculed because you have this one religious fanatic, but there's no other religious organizations, religious groups. There's not even a church that's shown within the area of this neighborhood.
Wow, you're right.
But you have at least the consistency in this neighborhood of it's white, working class, nuclear families, or just at least married couples. Because I can't remember if Joyce had any children or not. But at least having the child would, or at least having a child, whether it happens to be a teenager or a younger kid or even a college age kid, it would explain at least Burton's use of her as a vehicle to talk about the loneliness that the housewives would have in the 1950s and 1960s, and then trying to assert, who they are and who they want to be. He kind of degrades her a little bit and makes it kind of a trope and a caricature. But I think it works. So I don't see his choice in casting the neighborhood that way as problematic. I think if you were to redo it, an Edward Scissorhands reboot in 2020, you could have a more diverse neighborhood because you have more diverse neighborhoods now. If we're talking about working class and middle class neighborhoods. So it would work, but you'd still have that level of conformity within those communities. Because I'll tell you, as the only person of color in my neighborhood, and this is the second time this has happened. As the only person of color in my neighborhood, I make sure all my shit is clean outside. Like there are no cars that are parked outside. There are no cars parked on the lawn. I mean, we have an HOA that stops anybody from doing that. But
but there's still that added pressure.
Well, there is that added pressure of like, hey, if my dog goes outside, I'm cleaning it up right away. Whereas one of my neighbors that's all the way down on the end, you go and walk, go take a walk to go to the mailbox because apparently here they have the mail stations as well. It's kind of like they don't give a shit, and they have their dog droppings to prove it.
So you're saying that you've conformed enough that you're watching your neighbors and reporting your gossip? That's cool.
No, I look at it as I don't report to anybody. I ain't no snitch. No, I look at it as there is that social pressure that comes with the history of how neighborhoods have formed and the admission of people into those neighborhoods, to where if you happen to be a member of a marginalized community that was prevented from doing that, you look at all the stuff that you can do, and it's part of that bullshit respectability politics that everybody plays into. Hey, if I do this, I won't have any problems. So as long as I keep my yard clean, as long as I keep my house freshly painted or painted with the right colors, or I don't play my music too loud, I'm not going to have any problems. Which then gives me, hypothetically, gives me a little bit more credence to complain when somebody is playing loud music or doesn't keep their yard clean, or, whatever other type of bullshit measures that we have for determining who's a good neighbor and who's not. But yeah, long answer to tell you, I do agree with Tim Burton's usage of that, but Tim Burton's got some problematic things in many of his films that have to deal with race and even with gender for that matter.
Well, I mean, okay, so when I say Tim Burton's a racist, I'm playing it up. I'm being coy with it, but it has been an absolute concern on the internet over the years as people have analyzed his films, and it's basically because he tends to tell white people stories in white people settings, right? And then, but he does so in a magnified way. So he takes it to the next level, and that's what makes it more imaginary and more, it could be anything. And I think that's where he runs into problems. It's that, like, if he was doing realistic and gritty, then it makes perfect sense, right? But when he's taking it up a level and he's doing this crazy shit, then he could easily do crazy shit like cast a black person, right? So I think that's where it comes from when people say that. But so the kicker for me was this article in the copy I found online was bustle.com, and Rachel Simon had asked him about a movie and how he only had white people in it. And it's Tim Burton's response that pisses me off. It's not his actual casting and all that. Like, I could normally justify it. It's this response, because I hear this so much and people don't find this problematic. And that's what upsets me. And so what he said, I'm going to read it exactly, is nowadays, people are talking about diversity more and more, but things either call for things or they don't. And I remember back when I was a child watching the Brady Bunch and they started getting all politically correct. Like, okay, let's have an Asian kid and let's have a black child. And I used to get more offended by just that. I grew up. Oh, okay. Sorry. I screwed that up. I used to get more offended by that than just, and then he trails off. I grew up watching blaxploitation films, right? And I said, that's great. I didn't go like, wow, there should be more white people in this. So
okay, boomer.
So like your justification is that you watched blaxploitation films? Like, like that destroys I Have a Black Friend.
I was going to say that has to be the new I Have a Black Friend, because that holy shit. That's like saying, I listen to hip hop. I can say the N-word. No, you can't. No, the fuck you can't.
Now I'm picturing Tim Burton in his car, like rapping along and then turning it down like at the beginning of Office Space.
I guarantee you he does that.
But yeah, so when I say Tim Burton's a racist, like, I mean, it's really stuff like this. It's that he doesn't even, it's the shooting down the criticism. It's not, hey, let me look at that, or let's have a conversation about it. Like, this is why I don't think that black people would be in the suburban area in Edward Scissorhands. No, it's, well, black people and Asians infiltrated the Brady Bunch when I was a kid, so how do you think I felt? That's what pisses me off. It's that reaction, that defensiveness. And that's what I run into with people in my own life. And that's the shit that pisses me off. Like, I don't know. Anyway, that's my rant on Tim Burton, and I'll stop calling him a racist for the rest of this episode, probably.
No, keep doing it, because...
I will. I can't be trusted.
I just... he married one of my celebrity crushes, and Helena Bonham Carter's not answering my emails and texts and phone calls anymore. However, she did respond through a lawyer, though. So anyway,
you're still writing her at hbc_420_69 at hotmail.com.
Jesus Christ.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, well, speaking of casting, I think the one good thing, and I don't know if this was intentional or not, and we mentioned it earlier, but the police officer, police chief that happens to show up is black. And so for me, whenever you see a positive black role model in a film, or a positive black figure in a film, for me, I always look at that and think about who put him in, or who possibly put him in, or even the purpose of that person being in the film. Because thankfully, I had the chance to see Ernie Hudson years ago at one of the conventions, and he was speaking, and, I asked him, I said, actually, I'm sorry, I asked him a couple of questions, but then I thanked him when we were there, and I said, I thank you for never playing a stereotype, a caricature, or a trope in a movie. And he just sat there and he thought, he's like, holy shit, I never did. Just kind of like, he like in his head, he went through the dozens of, like, even when he played a villain, he was a smart villain. So in the movie The Substitute, he's a drug dealer. But the thing is, you don't realize it. Spoiler alert. You don't realize it. See, you knew we were going to do it. You don't realize it until halfway through the movie. And he gives this perfect excuse as to why. So he's basically like working for the people who are dealing it, at a higher level. And it was kind of one of those things of he has to do it. Somebody's going to do it. He needs to make the money. He has to do, he has to do all these things. And it almost seems like he's pushed into doing it. But it's not one of those things where he's walking down the street saying like, "What up, dog? You want some drugs?" It's not one of those bullshit roles. He's still highly articulate, very intelligent, very calculating. And so even with this police officer, I saw the same thing. I was like, please don't turn this into a thing where the cop says one of these cliched phrases. And I never see it. It's simply, he's in charge. He's a figure of authority. And even at the end, the only negative thing that happens is, even when he tells the white people in this town, hey, he's dead, don't go up there, he leaves. Instead of like doing kind of the cop thing of like, hey, let's get some cars out here and tape off this area. It's kind of like, I'm a cop, I'm a figure of authority, they should believe me. And then right after he leaves, they're like, fuck it, let's go up there and see.
Right. But they do respect it enough while he's there to act like they'll follow it.
Yeah. Which isn't necessarily about him racially. It's him about this society, because it doesn't matter what your badge has, what your ID has. If there is a community of people that want to do some shit, they're going to do it. They're just going to wait for you to leave. And honestly, that's what it comes down to in that portion. It's another form of their community authority spoke up, because Joyce is like, I'm going up there. And then everyone follows her. Whereas I think if she hadn't said anything, if she had turned around, they just started walking back, everybody would have left. And
I agree, because you can't let Joyce be the only one that saw whatever or did whatever,
Yeah, there is that whole idea of you kind of like within journalism, there's that idea of getting the scoop. Within these small neighborhoods, within these suburbs themselves, there is that idea of being privy to information. You don't want to be left out. And you definitely don't want to be left out of the good gossip. And that's what Joyce would have. She'd have that story that she'd go back and tell everybody, "Oh yeah, I saw his body and it was, it was such a sad, make up whatever bullshit story, even if she hadn't seen him."
Well, and I think that's part of it too. I think they're all like, Joyce would fucking lie. Like, I need to see this shit with my own eyes.
That's possible. But I honestly think it's more an issue of she's going, I want to go too.
Oh, yeah. No, I think that's definitely number one. I'm just saying I think that's also part of it.
Yeah.
But so while we're talking about the end, like I love how Edward escalates. You know, he goes from very innocent to defending the little brother from the car and, accidentally cutting him. And then to just straight out attacking Jim, and then to ultimately stabbing Jim and pushing him out a window, right? But I don't think any of that is out of character at all, because Edward doesn't live in our reality.
Right.
And he's always just taking out a threat. Like, he's still a very positive person and very, I feel like it really flows into everything that fits him. And I mean, I don't know that he fully understands death anyway. Like, I mean, he says the inventor didn't wake up.
Right.
But I don't think he was like, I'm going to end Jim. I think it was just reactionary. Okay. And one of the things I read online was like, oh, Edward goes from totally innocent to like full on, being able to kill people and blah, 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 blah. And I think that really discounts his character and his understanding of reality.
Well, it totally does.
And what I like about that is that really fits in with all the teenagers as well, because teenagers also have no sense of reality. But no, so then Jim falls and he dies, and then like the whole town walks up and they see that dead body and they get distracted by it and they stop looking for Edward. Right. It's kind of interesting.
Well, they're gonna go, but then I always forget Winona's character's name, but she comes out of the house with that one claw that she finds and like, oh, he's dead. Here's your proof. And they're kind of like, oh, okay, fuck it, he's dead. Let's go.
I can never forget her name because her name is Kim. And when this movie came out, I was, or at least like, maybe not when it came out, but like it was still relevant. I was dating a Kim, so everyone would be like, Kim and Jim, huh? And I hate the name Jim. Don't ever fucking call me that. But so it's internally ingrained in me what their names are. So. But yeah,
I'm glad I'm not the only one who has movie memories like that.
But yeah, when she comes out with the extra hand, and holds it up to everybody, that's a great moment. But I like that they just believe her. They don't have to go see it.
Well, why would she lie?
Exactly.
It's her boyfriend who was just killed. Why would she lie to save Edward? Yeah,
I think that's great. Such a good way to write it off so that people let it go, So yeah, so do you have anything else you want to add to this movie?
I don't know. It's just this movie itself, for me, doesn't lose anything from the 30 years since it was made. It doesn't lose anything. It holds up well. In all honesty, I forgot that it was a Christmas movie. So, I guess I've already started my Christmas movie viewing for this year.
I actually thought it was better now than when I watched it. And I mean, that's probably not a time issue as much as an age issue. But
I definitely got more out of it myself.
I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great flick. And in the past, it's one of those movies I sort of liked, but didn't really care about, So yeah, so I would agree that it holds up really well. All right, so I guess
that's the talent that Tim Burton has because we did Beetlejuice, and that one holds up well.
Yeah.
This one does. Hell, if we could have Pee-wee's Big Adventure is fitting in, I guess we could cover that one as well.
I mean, is that horror? Oh wait, that goes back.
Yeah, Large Marge.
Good
And the whole
Lord.
idea of having your personal property stolen from you and then engaging in some cross-country trek to find it and recover it. But I mean, I respect Jesus, I can't even get his name right. I respect Tim Burton in the sense that he's made some things that leave an indelible mark on you when you watch them, as far as like they stay in your memory. You might not remember everything about the film, but you remember what works. You remember the things that stood out to you. As opposed, there's some movies that I've watched, I'll go back and rewatch it, and I forgot that I saw it because I figured like, oh, I haven't seen this movie. And then halfway through, I realized like, no, all this stuff looks way too familiar. Whereas his stuff, it stands out. And hate to use a cliched phrase, but it does stand the test of time by still being, for the most part, relevant with this film. But then also serving as I would say, as an educational tool, if you were to talk about Levittowns, restrictive covenants, covenant contracts, and all the different ways that discrimination has been used in housing, as well as looking at what's being represented in the film. But yeah, I still like it. I mean, it's and it's one of those movies that if you have those Tuesday night classics at your local movie theater, I would definitely recommend that you reach out to them and see if they have a screening or can hold a screening of it.
Awesome. All right, so I think that about wraps things up. So I'm not sure what we're doing next week yet, so you don't get to know yet. So as always, I am James Sabata.
And I'm Don Guillory.
And we will see you next week.